Thanks, Slavo. That was crystal clear. Diana?
Okay. Thank you. As Jordi said, I am here representing the Leiden Manifesto, which the authors put forward as a way to think about the future use of indicators, in a way to try to change the trajectory in the use of indicators, trying to provide a tool for people who wanted to improve practice, at minimum by enabling scientists to hold to account bad indicators that were coming at them. But there seems to be a desire out there for a recipe to follow. You know, how do we apply the manifesto? And we certainly didn't provide a recipe, because we know that metrics have to be tailored to the context, and so local expertise has to be brought to bear, and so it's impossible to provide one perfect recipe to do perfect metrics. So we just hoped to guide this process, this local process, by a modest set of consensus principles of best practice. We're now kind of curious about the effect that the manifesto is having in policy contexts. So I'd like to invite anybody who's had any experience of or anecdotes or observations of the use or invocation of the manifesto in policy discussions to send me an email with your observations or a description of what you've seen happen or changes you've seen made or failures. Paul Wooders really wants to gather up failures. He thinks they would be the most super interesting for our paper. We want to put together a paper on this. I mean, one thing that's been very mentioned here is that, you know, scholars can't control the use of their work. So, I mean, we want to confront that directly and ponder that a bit. And in fact, we have constructed that directly and pondered that a bit here. We were all bemused to see the conference, which technically is Jordi and Ismail, distributing this document in our conference pack, which is entitled Thomson Reuters Solutions and the Leiden Manifesto. We're planning to unpack this seeming appropriation of the manifesto. I think it's going to be an interesting part of this paper we're planning. The seeming appropriation because it's unreferenced. There's no reference on this thing. So we're planning to have a lot of fun with our exegesis of this document. Of course, this use of the manifesto is much better than nobody noticing, okay, the manifesto. And of course, we all have to appreciate that Thomson Reuters is on the front line dealing with governments and institutions who want to misuse metrics. So if this helps Thomson Reuters improve practice out there by having something to point to say why we can't do what you suggest, you know, then we've done some good, and that would be great. So it'd be nice if someone from Thomson Reuters could send us their experiences as well, if the manifesto has helped them in their business in that way. So I think I will leave it at that.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Judith's turn.
Well, I'm going to be very short, brief. First, the power of numbers. In timekeeping, in trading, in fighting, men counted numbers, and finally, as the habit grew, only numbers counted. This is from Lewis Mumford, Techniques and Civilization. Moreover, we know from another anthropologist how we can mismeasure man, Stephen Jay Gould, and for that matters, all types of issues, including mismeasuring science, technology, innovation. Fighting frontally, we are not Heracles. The hydra of numbers will defeat us. Alternatives? When in the 19th century man was mismeasured, it was really awful. But measurement was better and better and better thanks to people like all of us that was working hard to find better ways of measuring. So alternatives is keep on working. I know that I am not very specific, but well. The power of geography. So our indicators are not neutral or to context. In fact, the vast majority of current STI indicators have their origins in the north and typically reflect the properties of the science system in these regions. Unless we make an attempt to understand what a specific indicator means in context, we are likely to draw hugely implausible conclusions that may have far-reaching conclusions for policy and strategy, and this was what Johan Moulton told us this morning. Brilliantly. Alternatives? This is a picture by a Uruguayan painter, Joaquín Torres Garcia. He said, the South is our North. It's just Latin America the other way around. And we have to think the other way around, all of us, because there is South in the North, there is North in the South. Everything is a little bit mixed up, but specifics is very important, and homogeneity is very bad to understand and to act. The power of truth. There are three types of lies: lies, damned lies, and statistics. This is a well-known motto by Disraeli. Alternatives? To commit ourselves to build meaningful truth regarding our own realities, to unearth situations related meaningfully to the aims we have. A modest example for you from Uruguay. Overall aim to democratize knowledge. Localized aim to democratize access to higher education. How should we measure? A possible proxy: how many students entering university at a given year were the first in their family to access university? Uruguay 2014, 64%. Important result? Yes. Substantially and politically, inside and outside university. And then, using indicators in the future would mean to be committed seriously to this. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I think we have been, you have been exemplary, short and clear. Now we can do two different things. We can have debate here around the table, and you kind of listen, or we can give the floor to you. To have a debate here in the table, we have a problem. Those who have stayed here during the conference, you will have realized that the acoustics in the front are terrible. So we are having a debate without understanding very much what each other are saying, but that happens normally in debates anyway. But I think you had something you wanted to say.
Yeah, two comments on the presentations. The first comment on Slavo. I have another quotation. Someone said, I don't remember who, if indicators become policy targets, they stop to be good indicators. Because then policymakers try to do everything so that the performance looks good, and maybe sometimes there's room for maneuver in the definitions and so on. We didn't see that too much, but we saw it sometimes. For example, there was an indicator on lifelong learning, and once this became a policy target to increase lifelong learning participation, for example, France increased the reference period from 1 week to 4 weeks, which was legitimate. This was okay because for the other countries it was 4 weeks, but finally a country saw that this is an important indicator and it should be brought in line so that the country doesn't look so bad in that. A second comment I want to make is about the periphery and central periphery decline. We saw this also in Europe. When I started in the Commission over 20 years ago, there were less legal acts, and availability of data was related to the size of a country. You saw much more bigger statistical publications, for example, in transport, in bigger countries, in Germany, France, UK. They had more data because they had big ministries, they had budgets, they could do all these statistical data production. And the small countries, they didn't have the data, and they sometimes just relied on the bigger countries to think that their situation is similar. And Eurostat, or the Commission, has very much closed this gap because the Commission has adopted legal acts and forced member states, also small ones, to produce a certain set of data. And then now this difference is much smaller. We have for Malta, for Cyprus, where we had 20 years ago very few data, we have a similar core data sets. And a second source for this increase of data is also, let's say, the OECD, because the OECD cannot do legal acts. They have a moral power. They produce publications. They work with their member states. They have some kind of moral pressure that these member states produce a certain number of indicators, and they publish these data, and then it doesn't look good for a country if it's a blank, if it's a gap, and then ministries say, why don't we produce that? OECD doesn't include very tiny member states. We don't have Malta and Cyprus, but we have more European countries now. We have even Latvia and Slovenia and so on, and these countries want to be in the OECD publications, and OECD goes beyond the core set of Eurostat data. So these developments that countries want to be in these international publications, in the benchmarking exercises, lead to more data being produced and the decline in the center-periphery gap. Also, OECD is expanding to South America. Chile is now a member, Mexico since more than 20 years, so also more data for these countries. And so the data gap is declining, data are becoming more widespread, but we reach also a certain limit. For example, enterprises complain there are too many surveys, we have to spend too much time filling in questionnaires, and we in the Commission, we are doing this community innovation survey, which is an important source for innovation data on enterprise levels, but we cannot add much more questions anymore. There's an omnibus principle, one in, one out, because enterprises complain all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I'm going to say something now. I had an impression sometimes in the debates we are having here in this conference that I'm not very sure whether we disagree. I think that in many things we disagree, but from your last participation here, from what we just said now, I think we have a point of agreement that almost surprises me a bit. You know, you referred to this when, you know, this saying when indicators become a target, this is to be good indicators. I think this is a law, isn't it? Goodhart's law, is it? I always forget, my memory is bad for names, but this is very much good. I'm saying yes. I got it right. Yes, I passed. Goodhart's law. This is extremely concerning from a policy point of view. So on top of the issues that Slavo mentioned of why you should not be pursuing the target, on top of it, when we pursue the target, that ceases to be even an indicator, which is, from a policy perspective, this should be really bad news if we believe the Goodhart's law. And then in the same line, my feeling has always been that one of the key elements in the Leiden Manifesto is that the statement that indicators are here to inform and help decisions, not to be a substitute for decisions, which is more or less exactly the same that you said, Slavo. And then it's something also that, in other words, should be said. You know, the power of numbers, we started by counting numbers, and then we end up in a situation in which only numbers counted. So it's a bit an expression of the same problem. So I think we agree in an expression of a very core problem we are facing. The problem is something I wanted to just throw to the table to see if we can reflect a bit, is that although there is this huge agreement on this huge problem, things continue to be exactly the same and tick-tock along, and nothing much changes in the use of indicators. So it's, you know, it's like a Greek tragedy. You know it's going to end up badly, and you know that you cannot do anything about it, and you just watch the tragedy, and at the end you cry. You know, so that's a bit of an unsettling situation. So one of the questions I wanted to put on the table is, do we have a way forward? Can we think of ways in which we can work towards a use of indicators? This is according to these principles and is aware of these difficulties. But having thrown the question, I think another thing I can do now is to throw it to you to the floor. Questions, comments, debates, criticisms are all much welcome. And there is one there, and another one. That way
up. Yes. And this is the core problem, but I find it surprising that we are having a very static view, and I've been discussing it with several people in various locations, that in the end, this whole community sitting around here is busy with developing, redeveloping indicators, whether it's more indicators or less indicators that happen to be the target. It's always about the advocacy power of indicators. And the advocacy power is not static. So you need to have it out there, but this goes back that once you have the advocacy function out there, you need to go back to the individual indicators. And this dynamic is what keeps these conferences going ahead. So my question then is, do you want to get out of this cycle, these ups and downs?
We got the question? Or we didn't get the question? We did?
I could say something.
Okay.
Yeah, I think these policy cycles are a reality, and we should take this reality into account, and we have to answer the needs of a society, and the needs are changing. There are stable long-term needs, but there are also quickly fluctuating short-term needs. So we have to develop a strategy for satisfying long-term needs, where they are still there in 10, 20 years, and this is, for example, on R&D expenditure. Then there are, let's say, more medium-term needs. We have to see what we can do, how we can exploit better existing data. And then short-term needs, they come and go, and for that, we need to be very flexible. We have to be creative, using best existing data, but we don't have to establish a very heavy machinery for very short-term needs that maybe are outdated in a few years. So I think if we differentiate the needs, then we can more appropriately design data so that they fulfill these needs.
Good. Now I'm going to engage in a conversation. Let's see if we got the question right. Ours. You know, I'm a bit confused now. That also happens very often, so don't worry. The way I understood, so your question is whether you have this advocacy power of indicators that is dynamic, therefore changes, and whether we think that having an advocacy power of indicator is something we should struggle against. Was that the question? Like we should fight against the advocacy power of it, whether we were happy with the advocacy power of indicators or not? Was the way you were going, or was something not quite? So can you, is there a microphone again, please? No, yeah, yes.
Okay, let me try again.
Okay.
Here I am quoting a nice paper of 2007 by Andrea Saltelli, who used to work with us at the Joint Research Center in ISPRA, where his point was that composite indicators, but you can look at other indicators, are both advocacy tools as well as analytical tools. Probably this makes my point a bit clearer. At some points, you need to have the advocacy power of the indicator stronger to mobilize resources to tackle the issue of access to education in the global south, or do technological upgrading in the peripheries, or climate change or something, you need to have it, of course, stable up to a certain point. And then indirectly, as you go, you break it down into indicators. But that is the normal cycle of this business. So this is my concern, that if you are criticizing this cycle, what else, as a cycle or as an overall approach or paradigm, do you suggest? Well, is it clearer?
Yeah, I think I'll give it a first shot, if I can. Yes, I can, because I'm the chair, so I do whatever I want. So
sorry, I'm Daniel Vertesi from the Joint Research Center of the European Commission.
Sorry?
Sorry?
No, okay. So I think we agree that in terms of, oops, I see what you meant. Yes, that wasn't working very well. That in terms of an alternative, you know, whether we agree or not with the cycle and the use of advocacy power, do we have an alternative? Well, probably not. But I think what we have is a problem that's much bigger than the one you're putting forward. Because if the choice was between analytical and advocacy, you are presupposing a system of policy making which is based in active policy discussion. And so the indicators participate, are part of this policy discussion, and are a tool in a debate, and that's advocacy. And that, from my perspective, would be just dandy, would be very good. The problem is that this is not what happens. The indicators used in policy often are not an element of advocacy, and an element of norm. It's the norm you have to stick to. It's that you only count the number, you have to follow the numbers. There were, in the presentation you made, there were elements of it. You know, it's important, you have to understand the performance through the indicator, and then you work towards the performance. The cases that Slavo presented, those were not advocacy users of indicators. Those were policy users in a normative way. And that's the problem. So if it was all about advocacy, I wouldn't be here. I would be happily in the lawn having another chat and enjoying myself, because I would think that it's very good. But it's more serious. And the problem is that, in fact, yeah, probably we don't have an alternative, because the policy cycle is such and the policy practices are such that are very difficult to change. And what are we? Just poor researchers trying to do our best. So, but,
as far as I understand your question, your analytical and advocacy division, what I would say is advocacy is much more normative than analytical. And then we have a problem. When the World Health Organization put forward the 90-10 gap, this is analytical, and this is advocacy, and this is normative, and it is good. But it's good because I agree with the normative aim of putting these indicators forward. If you say, okay, we have few patents, you should have more patents. We are not in the ranking, in the position, we should be there. And we distort everything to go there. This is advocacy, and I against, because the normative perspective, I do not agree. So I think that it's a little bit relative of aims that goes beyond the analytical division.
Yes, in the policy practice, we see similar things, but a bit different differentiation of indicators. We have, let's say, overall policy broken down into sub-policies or targets, and then we need indicators to monitor progress towards these targets, to monitor performance of countries and how we progress. So there, the indicators are predefined by the policies. But then we have a second, more open set of indicators we need, namely to prepare policies where we identify problems and then policies to address these problems. So two types of indicators, indicators that follow the policies, that enable to monitor progress towards defined policies, So this is more defined, and then an open set of indicators that have a more explorative character, where policymakers see where problems are, and then they use that to develop policies, and then later they need indicators to monitor progress on these policies.
If I could contribute something on this discussion. I'm one of those who is basically working on periphery of countries in Europe, and I'm faced with a matrix which is designed for the core. So I'm continuously exposed to this frustration that matrix is not relevant to the periphery. And as a result of that, I decided 2 years ago, 3 years ago, within the project to generate alternative metrics. We presented it on the last Pro conference and we submitted to a journal, so I hope you will see it. But the point was not that kind of I would expect some kind of different ranking of countries or some another world. My point was that the metrics, when one matrix becomes too dominant, it becomes harmful. And you have to have a balanced diversity of matrices. Why? Because then you can focus attention of policymakers on possibly another drivers. Because when you have a core and periphery, then the drivers are different. If you have one matrix, no way that can be good and for core and periphery. Therefore, my aim was not to come with something which I would consider superior. No, I said, no, this is a matrix just for the periphery. It cannot be used as a general, so you have to have a lot of caveats for which that matrix applies. And it's not there to expect some crazy different ranking on countries, but to refocus attention of policymakers on other issues which they don't think about. Because it's fantastically to see how people basically, in their daily routine, your indicators are focusing their policy actions on that. Of course, they are accountable and they have to show what they're doing, and that is all within the metrics. You can't run away. So I would encourage strongly alternative, competing, and not having one dominant. When it becomes dominant, it becomes like a monopoly. It becomes too harmful. So I would encourage really in that respect. And I like in that context, however, I'm kind of, we're all tired of composite indicators. But the good thing with composite indicators is that they at least contain a multiplicity of objectives and multiplicity of criteria. So that's already something, there are different trade-offs of there. But of course, the same problem applies. If one becomes too dominant, it is also not good. But at least I think there is a opportunity to accommodate this variety of things. And maybe just a small point to Richard's, where you said, we first would like to know what are the needs. Unfortunately, in this case, it's a situation where supply generates its own demand. And there, a lot of that rests on us, on academic side, to show the structural features of different countries and what are the appropriate matrices.